Welcome, sir. Well, now State Manager of North with years of experience. You're like a crusty old man. And where's Manny? Manny's around somewhere. Manny Damianakis. Is that how that's a great Irish name. Rightio, we're going to talk a little bit about how to improve your clients and how it actually works. So let's talk a bit about that. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to IMAP for having us along today. It's really exciting to continue to be a partner with IMAP, and the agenda today is really exciting, I think. And as Mike pointed out, there's lots of stuff on today's agenda that you don't necessarily get at PD Day. So I'm really excited to be here with my guest this morning, who I'll introduce to you in a moment. But I just want to say, without the support of our business partners, financial planning practices, and IMAP, we wouldn't be as successful as we are in the managed account space. So when I look at North, the North platform, which is where I'm from, we've more than doubled our FUM over the last 12 months. And so I do thank those in the room who've supported us in the last few years, including my guest, Manny Damianakis. Now, Manny's actually got two bios. And so what I might do, Manny's role at Insight and PSK, many of you probably know Manny here and PSK obviously, but I might just ask Manny to start with who is PSK and who is Insight and what is your role within both?
Thanks, Staten. And that's probably one of the benefits of getting old, is you do get a few more job titles attached to yourself when you're working in different organisations. But I'll start with PSK Private Wealth. It's been a long-standing advice business. Started here in Sydney, was part of, going back many years, the old National Mutual, AXA, and then became part of AMP, and more recently acquired AMP's advice business. So we're now a national firm with some 80 advisors, approximately 300 staff. And I'll explain why that's actually really important for today's discussion, because once you build that sort of scale, it then becomes very difficult to start to just have 80 advisors doing 80 different things. So we did need to look at a more, robust, centralised solution. Fortunately for PSK, they had invested in an internal investments team, Insight Investment Consulting, which was founded by Chris Liudis 10 years ago. So PSK already had that capability by building paper-based model portfolios and having an approved list. So that gave us the sort of starting point to look at the managed account offer.
Okay, excellent, mate. Thank you. Thanks for giving us a little bit of that insight there into your business. Pardon the pun. Now, mate, can I just ask, so this is a conversation between you and I, and obviously the audience here today, on managed accounts. And appreciate that for PSK, managed accounts are relatively new. Yep. You haven't been doing them for years and years at the business. But we might start with what led you to consider implementing managed accounts in the business?
Yeah, and as probably there was two key elements. Actually, in our case, it was coming through from advisors. So there were advisors in the firm that had been to sessions like this. So they then came back to the research team and said, look, why don't we have a managed account offer available? So there was a bottom-up push from advisors. And then, as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges for any larger advice practice licensee is, and as mentioned in the BlackRock presentation, we saw this notion of cost to serve and building scale, because we wanted to challenge this notion that, because we're a retail business, so our clients are predominantly sort of mass we're not really in the high net worth space at PSK. We typically deal with sort of affluent Australians, and you've got retiring advisors. We know there's fewer advisors in the industry, there's fewer advisors entering the industry. So from our point of view, is trying to look at solutions that you could actually allow an advisor to serve more clients, because often you might meet advisors and they say, I'm full. I'm done, I can't see any more clients. And with some of our longer term advice relationships within PSK, we wanted to challenge that and see what are the ways we could actually get advisors to have more clients attached to their list.
Yeah, okay. And any specific examples on how managed accounts have positively impacted the business?
And I'd say, so I'd look at, firstly, most of our advisors did use some form of model portfolio. So within a larger group, you're going to get, and I've seen this across a lot of different licensees and advice businesses, there's always going to be different ways that some advisors operate. You can have standardised advice processes, but from an investments point of view, some advisors either use direct equities, use managed funds, use multi-manager, passive approaches. So for us, we had a bit of a broad church within PSK, but we always had the model portfolios. So it was then, because we were able to build it, and I said we had the scale and the resources to build a managed account, we did make the managed accounts look very similar to the paper-based models that they were already familiar with. So then the transition from advisors to using model portfolios to managed accounts for us wasn't that difficult. So that was actually why then they can then see the benefits. So a tangible benefit is when we make, and I'm sure this has come up at a lot of sessions, if there's a corporate action, a hybrid matures within a managed account, the central Chris manages that process centrally. The advisor does not then have to actually go out and email and get permissions as to what they're going to do with the proceeds of a maturing security. So that's one really good example, because we do, in our income portfolios, have a lot of hybrids.
Yeah, okay. And so that's interesting, because sometimes you'll see some advisors will start to use the off-the-shelf, the buy menu, which we refer to as managed accounts. But you're saying that your team didn't necessarily go through that. You've gone paper-based straight into building your own.
Correct. And that, again, we had the scale. Look, and the benefit there is, and again, at Insight, so within the Insight Investment Consulting business, obviously do a lot of work for PSK, but we also manage external licensees and provide consulting service to those. And we found one of the biggest blockers to getting a managed account take up is where it's, and again, I've been around advisors for a long time and around other industries, change is difficult for a lot of people. So if you make the leap from what an advisor's already been doing from an investment process and you launch a managed account that's completely different, has different investment strategy, it may even be a better investment solution, but it's just going to be a problem I've found for those advisors, because they don't feel they've bought into that. They feel it's just been something that's thrust upon them. Whereas in our case, we have an open investment committee. Advisors are welcome to come and join it. They are familiar with the process, and I think that's been why there's been a pretty good take-up of the managed account. If we did something completely different and just said, here you go, it would have just sat as a new product launch on the APL, and it would have had to have had that real push from multiple sources to get the advisors on board.
And PSK is a big organisation, lots of advisors in there. There's no mandating they have to be using managed accounts, but is there what sort of percentage would you know roughly who are using?
We get North, so we launched it. So we launched our managed account back in April of last year on North. So North's the primary platform we use. Percentage of advisors actually been pretty strong. Funnily enough, with the we've acquired a lot of businesses over the last 2 or 3 years. We've actually found with the businesses we've acquired, that was an easier, most of those have come on board with the managed account because they were kind of looking for a solution to, they were going to build it themselves, or they were looking at other managed account offers, so they've come up quickly. Look, I'd say at least half of the advisors within our network have at least put a couple of clients into the managed account. And there are some, the ones who were very involved in the development have pretty much moved in the last 12 months have moved the majority of their clients onto managed accounts. So it's definitely been something, and we're pleased about that because the effort that's gone into launch it, you don't want to launch an offer to your advice network and they don't take it up. So that's been, and there'll be some, and we'll get to why. We can talk about why the ones that don't. But there's again, I just look at there's some advice practitioners that just are very change resistant. They've been doing something for a long time, and they're happy to keep doing it the same way. And I don't think often you can never win them over.
Yeah. Well, maybe this question should be asked of those that haven't taken it up yet. But in what ways have managed accounts helped streamline, I guess, your operations at PSK more broadly? Or increased efficiencies?
Look, the best example I can give is we can now see when you've got a centralised portfolio, your exposures. So if we didn't have the funds that aren't on managed accounts, so often, we've got an internal research team, there might be an issue with a fund where we downgrade it, put it on a sell or want to exit an investment. We'd then have to we'd look through the operations team, go through X-Plan, have to have a look at what our exposures are, both on platforms, direct. The beauty with the managed account, straight away you can see, we've got this name in the portfolio. And so I think from a visibility, compliance, risk management, communications to advisors, that's so much easier than us. It might take a week or so to go to all the different product providers and get and understand what we actually have exposure to. So that's just the one pertinent example. And just, again, just switching and making decisions is just a lot easier than a paper-based model. There's just not, we don't know what the changes are necessarily going to be till we get some reporting from a platform or through our advice tool. So yeah, they're probably the two best ones I can give you.
Yeah, no, that's good, mate. Thank you. And 1 year in, so you've just really hit 12 months with the managed. Well, we refer to them as managed portfolios. So I'm going to sort of interchange, and apologies for that, just through habit. But 1 year in for managed portfolios for PSK, and I'm not sure if you can comment on this or not, mate. But has there been an improvement in customer satisfaction? I'm not sure if you run customer satisfaction surveys, or an improvement in client retention since introducing these.
Look, it might, I mean, I guess we see now, again, I see advisors, I can look at it probably more at an advice practitioner lens than an end client one. We do see advisors now that have embraced this approach. They are a bit hungry for referrals. They're certainly increasing, because we're taking away a lot of the work that an advisor has been doing historically around it's almost this, a change has to be made, and then an advisor communicates that, gets the permission and implements that change. And that's what I get to. Some advisors really enjoy that part of the advice process. They see it as a very intricate part of how they communicate with clients, so they don't want that taken away from them. But the ones that are there saying, you know what, I know these investments, I understand Chris and the team and what they're doing for our portfolios, and then I can just, that all gets done without me having to worry about it. That literally means that takes a lot of work off them. And some of the advisors have really made that the point where they're looking at acquisitions, or they're starting to think, no, I can actually, I used to think I could only deal with 80 clients. I can deal with a lot more now with the supports around me and client servicing, operational support. So, yeah, and that would then, I mean, we haven't measured it yet, but our retention rates are pretty good with the client. We look at it AAAs and retentions and keeping clients signed in. It feels like our business metrics are performing really well.
Yeah, and it's so as a platform, we obviously see clients that move on from managed accounts, and there's a particular process that we follow as part of a platform. And for you guys, mate, PSK, we have not seen too many clients leave who are in managed accounts. I could literally count it on one hand. So obviously something's working really well there for you. And what about managed accounts? How's that affected your ability to provide personalised services or tailored offerings to individual clients? Again, appreciate, mate, you're probably not as close to the clients, but from an advisor perspective.
And that's what I'd say is the biggest, and where I'd see it not working within some advice businesses or licensees, with either in PSK or externally, some of the clients we consult to, it is down to how the advisor has positioned themselves in the past. So if they've positioned themselves as, I'm the person making all of these decisions, they then will consult a client before the changes get made. Those advisors typically haven't been the ones that have embraced a managed account in my experience. So we need, I guess what we've been able to do within PSK is, because it's built for PSK, only PSK clients can use that managed account. So for instance, if a client leaves so we don't actually charge a separate fee for the managed account. It's just part of the offer of the advice fees that a client pays PSK. That's what they get. They get the managed account as part of being a client. So if they did leave PSK, they get sold out of the managed account on North. So then they can only be in that investment structure if they're a client. So I guess we've then worked with those advisors that have been a little bit more reticent to say, well, if I'm not the one buying and selling the securities and making those decisions, what am I really, what do my reviews look like? We're asking them to come into the investment committee, understand the decisions that get made, so that there's no, just because they're not the one asking for the signature, making the move, they're still involved, they still understand the rationale behind those investment decisions. I think that's really important. But we're not there yet with some advisors. And we may never get, there's some advisors that love, I say to them, why do you care about what's going on with reporting season? You're financial, why would you sit and look at what's going on with an individual name? But they really do enjoy and embrace that offer, and that's how they communicate to their clients. So I think, and that's, every advisor is different. So we just feel that definitely from a business efficiency, making money and growing your business, a managed account is far superior.
Yeah, and I guess that comes down to the flexibility as well with PSK. There's not that mandate to say you must use these managed accounts that we've built for you. And also just picking up there on, so once clients do leave, what happens on the platform, for those that you may or may not be aware, but if a client does leave PSK, they can no longer be part of your bespoke partner managed portfolio. And so what the platform does then is they de-link effectively those clients that sit in there. If that client has left PSK, we unbundle the managed portfolio around it. The clients hold those assets loosely, and they won't participate in any further changes. So it's then up to the new advisor to pick that up and determine what's appropriate for them in terms of investments. What about challenges, obstacles you've faced whilst implementing these? And I know this took a few. There was a lot of work, obviously, as platform and your business do in the lead up to these. And there was probably, I recall, there was a period maybe of a few months of this had been set up, but you wanted to make sure you rolled it out appropriately to your business.
Look, did you want me to go through the operational teething issues, mate, or are you happy to?
Well,
because we got poor Staten. He was on a speed dial for us, and look, like and this is any operational change that you go through in a large business. It's not seamless. And anyone who tells you, it's just you click a finger and this happens, it's not like that. But we felt there was some initial challenges of just getting them set up, the portfolio set up, trading them. And again, it was from our point of view because we'd never done it before either. So, and that's I guess that's then the decision of going through a process with, if you buy an off-the-shelf managed account as a licensee, that is a lot easier. You just take it and you use it and it's there. Whereas in our case, we did want to build our own. So that meant there was some teething issues. That was, and again, the advisors didn't really see that, which was good. It was more or less from the investment manager through operations and the way we had them set up on X-Plan and internally. They were probably the main challenges. But again, that kind of got sorted out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and there's a full project plan that's put in. When you go through a bespoke and a build, there is a full project plan put in place. We have weekly and fortnightly meetings with the practice to ensure there's no sort of shocks along the way. But it's all about communication, and you guys did take a little bit of time once they were set up and created. It was a few months before you launched it to your national business, and I think that worked really well.
We were lucky. We did have a few advisors within the network that volunteered to be guinea pigs, and they were the key. Again, this is what I think: if you're a licensee and you're going down this path and you want to build your own or work with a provider to do it, it is good to have some. We found across a lot of different. From smaller to larger licensees, it's good to have a few advocates within some advisors that are keen, and they kind of act as your internal. When it's launched, the other advisors see, well, so-and-so's got a big book of business, they're doing really well, and they're using this, so it must be pretty good. And that really helped us with having about 3 or 4 advisors that were the first adopters, because then we could test it, iron out some of the operational issues we had, and then we rolled it out we did a proper, and I know IMAP and Toby's running some training as well for licensees. It's definitely, you can't just launch this and just let advisors figure it out. You really do have to run through it and do a lot of upfront work around some of the challenges, because there will be, it is different to just running a paper-based model portfolio. There are a few challenges around managing cash allocations and how the client views the assets, that I think it's worthwhile training the advice network that you're operating in.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We just did some numbers recently. There are so there's a number of investment managers and asset consultants that have built managed portfolios on the North platform, and it's interesting to see that there are some investment managers that get the buy-in a lot quicker than some others. Perhaps that's not because they're good or bad necessarily, but it's probably sort of the philosophy that they've been working with in their practices, and to get that adopted across all the advisors within the business. That's not always easy to do, particularly for a large business like PSK. But we've got bespoke managed portfolios for obviously smaller businesses as well, where there might be 5, 6, 7 advisors, and there might only be 3 or 4 that have taken that up, and the other 2 or 3 haven't quite got there yet. And I think the engagement from the platform, the investment manager, / asset consultant is really, really critical early on to get that buy-in from everyone. I'm going to open it to the floor shortly, but I'll just ask one more question here, mate, if that's okay. Are there any particular features or tools within managed accounts that have stood out and made a significant difference to your business? You mentioned corporate actions before.
Yeah.
Was probably a main one.
Look, and accessing, things, again, from our point of view, going to from paper-based models to managed accounts, obviously you can access lower class fee within managed funds. There's a menu of funds available that have a lower embedded fee than the ones that an advisor would access directly on a wholesale wrap platform. So that's something that has been a feature. Because one of the challenge, I guess, an advisor does need to demonstrate, why moving from what they were doing to the new managed account with under best interest and just overall advice benefits. So that's definitely been one. And I do think having been, we've all sort of seen evolutions of, and I do remember when you used to get diversification by filling out retail investment forms and sending 4 checks to different fund managers to diversify portfolio, and then we saw master trust, wrap accounts, model portfolios. I do feel that this is I looked at the old multi-manager option was obviously what a lot of advisors would have been familiar. Now with the managed account, there is a lot, the client can actually see the names of the shares and the investments they hold, the performance of those individual investments. I will say that's a double-edged sword though, because they see a lot more. It's a lot, and then they see that, why have I got this in? And they always focus on the poorer performing strategy every time. Whereas if you did use an old multi-manager fund, it was bundled up in a unit price and it was there was a bit of communication. So definitely more transparency. We do identify then which clients within our network really are more engaged. And I know they've got a lot more time on their hands. They read the AFR and they come to all of the events we run, and they will now look a bit more closely and say, I noticed you bought that. And there is a little bit, you've got to expect a bit more of that if you've come from, again, it depends on the sort of advice business you've run. If you've come from one where you've used sort of more wholesale multi-manager style structures, that is a big change. And some of our advisors actually have come from that world. So they are now saying, have you got any information on this particular? So it has created a little bit of, especially when Mark, at the moment, we're probably not going to get those questions. Mark is doing well, but next downturn, you'll probably see a little bit more of that. Yeah. So that's what we say when advisors say, I'm not involved in the investment process because there's a central team building this managed account. Well, I sit there saying, you're still got to know what's in there. You've got to understand the decisions that get made, because ultimately you're going to get asked those questions. And being able to answer those questions is really important. So I think the transparency, as I said, I think it's a good thing, but it does cut both ways.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people in the room that have clients that may be better suited to the multi-manager that aren't going to sort of see those underlying. I'm sure everyone has those. I'll open it up to the floor. We've got a few minutes. Toby's got the mic over there. Are there any questions for either Manny or myself? Yep, we've got one, got two.
Hi, Manny. You mentioned about one of the successes was having advisors already using the paper models and then transitioning to the managed account piece. What's the history behind the paper models, and I guess how did you get a large amount of advisors using that in the first instance?
We had an internal CIO. So Chris Liudis was employed by PSK as an internal researcher. So even though the business back then was licensed through charter and had access to the licensee's offer, the business decided to invest in having an internal researcher. So his job was to research, effectively saying to advisors, look, we didn't want the advisors to spend a lot of their time researching different investment structures and building portfolios. We invested as a business in that function. So the advisors got familiar with Chris, spoke at client events. They could ring Chris. He got to know all of the advisors. So they then valued they respected him as a researcher and investor. So therefore, he. I don't want to make it look like when he started from day one, they didn't just say, here we go, we'll use your models. He had to build that credibility and rapport and relationship across the network. I think that's really important too. If you've got for the advisor to know who the person is that's building the model or the managed account investment team, that's vital.
Manny, we heard in the previous session talk about personalisation of managed accounts, yet we're also talking about the efficiency benefits of managed accounts. Obviously, the more personalised something gets, the less efficient it gets. Sure. How are you finding advisors are managing that trade-off in the real world?
Look, in the real world, it'll still come down to, look, so again, firstly, the element of if there is a one-for-all portfolio, centralised portfolio, the advisors that are doing well with that are familiarising themselves with what's going on there. So I mentioned that earlier, attending the committee, reading the stuff we put out, so that whilst you're right, it's not tailored for the specific client, the good thing is it's tailored for our advice process in that case. So a lot of our clients, again, I mentioned we PSK focus on mass affluent. There's a lot of similarities between a lot of the clients we deal with. However, I do observe where there are the high net worth client or the one that might have multiple entities, lots more complex advice requirements, or they may have their own inputs. There's still a level of, so that's why I said we haven't mandated that managed account across the board. So there will still be a level of consulting and input into some bespoke portfolios. But I guess our view as an advice business is that should be the exception rather than the norm. But you still, you can't just have a blanket, well, you can, it just means you're then going to have a narrowly defined client target market. Whereas we still are, we do have 80 advisors, we operate in multiple jurisdictions, we still deal with a lot of different people, but we found for the call it the average client that our advisors deal with, the managed accounts were built with that client in mind.
I've got a question, if there are no others, which is sort of, you talked about Chris and the investment team. I mean, has building portfolios and giving kind of the word made flesh, so to speak, through the managed portfolios, has that helped build a sense of who we are and what we stand for as a business? You know, that this is the investment part of what we stand for?
I'd like to think so. I mean, we're not, again, and we talk about this when we do clients, so we run multiple client events like this across the country, and we'll get up, so Paul Aspros, our CEO, will get up and talk about what's going on, and Chris might give an update. We keep our investment process very simple. So I do feel that that's, and a lot of the advice, again, the way we deliver advice, we do have it in mind that we're trying not to be overly complicated, over-engineered. So I think it's fair to say our managed accounts that we built reflect the advice process and our investment philosophies. So we're not tactically asset allocating, we're not buying very esoteric investments and really trying to be we are really looking to be a helping hand and a guiding advice light for these clients. So yeah, I think the way we built the managed accounts definitely mirrors that, and we echo that in when we see clients and when we take on new clients.
Other questions for Staten or Manny?
Okay, thank you, Staten. Manny.
Great, thank you.
Well done,
Thanks, everyone.
gentlemen. Thank you very much.